Well, among the announcements Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers delivered Tuesday night as part of the federal budget was an extra $9.3 million on top of the $328 million that was announced in the October budget for the National Teacher Workforce Action Plan. Now, this is the plan to address the chronic shortage of teachers around the country and to increase the number of people choosing to become teachers to make sure that existing teachers remain in the profession as well. It's a big plan, but it's important that it achieves its outcomes. This includes an extra 1,972 extra university places for students to train as primary and secondary school teachers, and 5,000 scholarships worth up to $40,000 to lure more high-quality candidates into teaching, including mid-career professionals such as lawyers and engineers and people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. So they want to get people who have already achieved in their chosen career to think about switching horses and using that life experience and that industry experience to fuel their abilities and their impact as teachers, which is an interesting idea. Let's find out a little bit more about the National Teacher Workforce Action Plan. Andrew Pierpont is president of the Australian Secondary Principals Association, the peak body for secondary school leaders across the country. Andrew, good morning and welcome.
Morning, David. How are you?
Very, very well. Now, new year, and I guess this is a process that was gone through last year, but it's not one that we've had a chance to sort of flesh out in any great detail, so I think it's worth doing. But you were part of a group, the National Teacher Workforce Action Group, that got together to discuss issues of getting more people into the teaching profession, keeping them there, and making that job a little bit more achievable so that they could actually get on with the job of teaching. Tell me a bit about how that all came about for starters.
Well, it came about that the Federal Minister, Minister Clare, had a roundtable in August last year, and that roundtable was about the Federal Department, the ministers and all the staff, but most importantly it was about teachers and principals at that meeting telling the Minister and telling the other ministers, the jurisdictional ministers, exactly what life was like from a staffing perspective out in schools at the moment. From that, the Minister, we got a very good hearing. From that came the National Teacher Workforce Action Plan group that had the various jurisdictions were represented. Also, the various sectors of education were represented. And that process went for about 4 months. We had about 22 meetings during that time where we fleshed out and had excellent conversations around what really matters. And we've got a good plan now to go forward. The key issue, I think, that came out of it is that there's no magic wand to fix the teacher shortage now. There's no magic wand to fix the teacher shortage within 6 months. We're in for a long haul, is what I want to say.
And I guess that's understandable. I mean, if you look at the scope of the problem, the size of the problem, it stands to reason there's no easy fix. And I guess looking at the key actions that came out of the report, there's quite a few, and we don't have time to go through all of them, but just a couple that I wanted to ask you about. And I've been curious a bit about this one since it's been was announced last year, which is this idea. There's a lot of recommendations that centre around attracting people from other professions to bring their expertise into teaching. It's how likely or how significant is that likely to be as a part solution to the teaching numbers problem?
Well, that's very important. It's a part solution. It's not the solution. There are parts to this, and this idea of getting people to do a career change to teaching is not a new idea. Manual arts teachers, you and I know them as manual arts teachers, industrial design teachers, for some time have had tradespeople who don't want to be, if I use the word, on the tools anymore. They come over to teaching. So that idea has been around for many, many years. Also, the hospitality industry utilises the cooks and the chefs of the world who want to change into teaching. So that idea has been around for a while. We want to grow that so that chemists of the world would like to move across. People who work as professional mathematicians can come across to teaching and just expand that a little bit more.
So how would it work in practice? I mean, someone who has achieved, and presumably they're in a profession where they have achieved a degree or perhaps even a master's, or in some cases even higher, what additional training would they need to undertake before they could make that transition?
Well, clearly they've got the content knowledge. Clearly they know how to their chemistry. Just use the example I used. They know that. What they may be lacking is the pedagogy, the how to teach, the why to teach, the philosophy behind teaching. So there is some education required there. Now, how long that is and how deep that goes is dependent upon another group that the minister set up, an ITE, an Initial Teacher Education group, that is looking into that, plus a whole lot of other things as well, but is looking into that. So that part of the program, that part of the solution has not been worked through yet because that's quite complex and it needs some thorough thought rather than just let's do that and get off and do it, you know.
And would it be, before we go on to other things from the report, would it be only for specific industries that, and I presume that the answer is yes, only for industries that translate directly into subjects that are taught at high school, or could the education system benefit from people who just have real world experience in a previous career before teaching, coming into teaching and taking that life experience with them?
Teachers who have a life experience, mature people generally, usually make good teachers. Not to say that young people don't make good teachers, but having that life experience can be utilised very, very positively. Obviously, a person, if I keep going with the example I've used, a person who is a chemist and working in a chemistry area, that's their passion, that's what they know. It wouldn't be usual for that person to teach phys ed, for example, but it's not out of the scope of the realms. So yes, it's probably going to be in a silo. Yes, it's probably going to be within that area of knowledge, but it doesn't have to be.
Andrew, another key feature of the report would be the idea of how do we keep the teachers that we have? How do we stop this exodus from the profession because of overwork and burnout and that sort of thing? One of the things that I think is worth fleshing out a little bit further is a recommendation to pilot new approaches to reduce teacher workload through a workload reduction fund to maximise the value of a teacher's time. Tell me about a workload reduction fund.
It's a fund which looks at the reduction of workload to teachers. Now, let me just explain that. The reports that have been done into the workload of teachers, there's been a little bit of media around the amount of administrivia that teachers are required to do now, but it tends to be non-Commonwealth work. It tends to be jurisdictionally based. Right. So that is the states and the territories generate a great deal of work apart from the teaching for teachers to complete. So the work, this fund will looking at those work areas at a jurisdictional level that can be or may be reduced over time. And the complexity around that, why there needs to be some money put aside for that, is that in one state it's different. The administrivia that's required is different to another state. So it's much more of a complex issue than might be seen straight off. The other thing I might just mention, David, at this point is that the Australian Secondary Principals Association has had a very, very positive meeting with the Minister, and you and I have spoken about over the many years about the workload of principals and the Phil Riley report, and how dire the state is for principals if we just look at principals. We've had a very positive meeting with the minister and said, in this report, Minister, we need to have a sixth area, and that's about the well-being of principals, because to be a principal, you need to be a teacher first. We never want to give that away. You need to have an educational philosophy. You need to have a philosophy about learning, for example. So area 6, we've called it retain and sustain the principles. And the minister is very, very keen to get the 6th area into this document. In fact, he looks at this document as being a living document, a document that can morph and change as we go along. And, if I just pick a number, priority 2, whatever that might be, that might be the flavour of the month at the moment. But as we go along, priority 3 might take over. So there's ebbs and flows within the document. It's not a holus bolus external approach right from the word go. So I think that's very important, those two concepts there, about the principles and about it being a dynamic document.
Andrew, where to from here? I mean, these discussions, and you've just said that how positive it is that this conversation has started and the doors are open for further discussions. But what are the commitments to return to the table and flesh out some of these plans in a little bit more detail? And what sort of timeline are we looking at from here?
Well, there's already action happening from the action plan. There's an oxymoronic term for you. There's already action happening. There's already work happening. I note last night in the budget, there was, I'm going from memory now, I think between $9 and $10 million allocated to the action plan and getting things done. So there's a bit of money around. So what's required is consistency of application. This isn't a 3-month plan. This isn't a 1-year plan where you do it and then you forget about it. You put a tick beside it and say it's done, because it's never done. And principals, this is our bread and butter. If we haven't got staff at school, if we haven't got qualified, good staff at school, then our schools are going to suffer.